Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever looked at the world around you? You know, the complex systems, the foundational structures, the very fabric of our society, and found yourself wondering, who designed all this anyway?
Hmm.
Who is truly at the helm, consciously or maybe unconsciously, shaping the reality we all inhabit?
Yeah,
Today, we're taking a deep dive into some truly thought-provoking sources that, frankly, challenge our assumptions about who holds the reins of modern civilization.
they really do.
Our listener, with characteristic bluntness, posed a very honest question about what consciousnesses are actively creating our current world. They even asked if it's the forces of lower consciousness that are most effectively at work.
It's a critical question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gets right to the heart of how our world actually operates, and our sources offer a remarkably sharp diagnosis.
Sharp is a good word.
Yeah. As our listener suggested, trying to gauge abstract concepts like consciousness or intention, well, it can feel difficult, almost intangible sometimes.
Right. How do you measure that? Yeah.
Exactly. But there's a powerful and uh, undeniable metric we can use: the outcome, the reality itself.
Okay.
If outcomes consistently reflect underlying intentions, and that's a big if we can explore, then the world we see around us is a direct mirror of the forces that are most actively, most strategically, and importantly, most intentionally shaping it.
So the results speak for themselves, basically.
That's the core idea. We'll explore exactly what that mirror reveals today, pulling back the curtain on the true architects of our shared reality,
Mm.
according to these materials.
Our mission in this deep dive, then, is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from these fascinating materials, giving you a shortcut to being well-informed about a topic that, let's face it, directly impacts every single one of us.
Mhm.
It's really about understanding the unseen currents that guide our world. So the listener's initial query, it cuts right to the chase. Beyond just the rhetoric of the ocean is still asleep, they asked, which groups of people are actively thinking, pondering, planning, and executing the architecture of modern society?
It's a great question. Very direct.
And they didn't stop there. They venture to guess that it feels like the intelligences of lower consciousness that are focused on self-interest and greed are the ones putting in the most effort, with the best concerted plans and execution. That's a powerful and pretty provocative intuition.
It is. And our sources contend that this diagnosis is, as they rather chillingly describe it, tragically accurate.
Wow. Okay.
When we strip away the euphemisms and what some might call spiritual bypassing, the blunt assessment presented in these materials is, well, quite clear. The most active shapers of modern civilization aren't necessarily the most conscious in a broad, holistic sense. Not at all.
But they're the most effective.
They're the most strategic, the most coordinated, and ultimately, yes, the most effective in their actions.
Okay.
This raises an important question for us to explore. What defines these different intelligences, as their sources term them, and how do they actually manifest in the world?
Right. How do we identify them?
Throughout this deep dive, our guiding principle will be this concept of outcome as mirror of intention. We're not here to speculate wildly on hidden motives or, get lost in conspiracy theories.
Good.
Rather, we're looking at the tangible results in the world, what's actually happening, to understand the underlying intentions that brought them about. If you truly want to know who is shaping things, these sources urge us to look at what has actually been built and what is consistently happening in our societies. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Makes sense. Look at the results on the ground. So this is where it gets truly fascinating, I think. If the world is being shaped by what our sources call higher intelligences of lower consciousness, I mean, that phrase itself just makes you pause. Who exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a striking phrase.
Let's dive into the specifics laid out in our sources, because they provide a very clear, almost, clinical picture of these groups.
Indeed. This cohort, according to our materials, represents the primary architects of our current reality. They possess immense strategic capability and a remarkable level of coordination that allows them to exert profound and often unseen influence.
Okay, so who are they?
Our sources identify several key players within this category. First, we have the corporate technocrats and financial elites.
Right, the big names you might expect.
Exactly. But it's about more than just wealth. These are individuals and vast conglomerates who possess a profound, almost granular understanding of global systems. Think for a moment about their mastery over complex supply chains that span continents.
Unbelievably complex stuff.
Right, allowing them to anticipate and leverage disruptions or even to create bottlenecks that consolidate power and, of course, profit. Consider their ability to exploit intricate legal loopholes using complex networks of shell companies and tax havens.
All perfectly legal, usually.
Often, yes, to accumulate vast sums of wealth, effectively privatizing profits while socializing environmental or social costs. They exhibit a deep understanding of human psychology.
Which they definitely use.
Relentlessly. Leveraged through sophisticated marketing, advertising, and the ubiquitous digital platforms that dominate our attention economy. They apply this knowledge not for universal benefit, but with the explicit aim, as our sources highlight, to, quote, sustain and grow their wealth without much regard to the web of life.
Wow. That's blunt.
It is.
Yeah.
Imagine secret boardrooms where strategies are meticulously crafted to maximize gain, far removed from public accountability.
So it's far beyond just traditional business smarts. It's a deep, almost surgical understanding of how the world really works, applied with relentless precision for their own gain.
Precisely. It's a very intentional, almost surgical kind of power. Building on that, our sources then point to government-aligned intelligence networks.
Okay, so not the elected officials necessarily.
Not the public faces, no.
Yeah.
Not the politicians you see on the news. Rather, they are actors, often operating in the deep shadows of public-facing institutions. They are instrumental in crafting global narratives that subtly yet profoundly influence in public opinion.
Shaping how we see things.
Exactly. Shaping the way we understand events. They play a significant role in orchestrating wars and treaties, often far from public scrutiny, guiding international relations with, well, an invisible hand.
Mm-hmm.
They manipulate currencies to their advantage, influencing global economies in ways that benefit their established order. And critically, they quietly suppress technologies or ideologies that might threaten their established grip on power.
Things that could actually change the game.
Potentially, yes. Ensuring that disruptive innovations or dissenting viewpoints don't gain too much traction. They are, in essence, the quiet hand guiding much of what you see on the global stage.
And what about the more public but still incredibly exclusive gatherings? Places like the World Economic Forum or Bilderberg. They get mentioned a lot.
Ah, yes, the opaque consortiums. Our sources are careful here. They note that these aren't always inherently evil, that's too simplistic,
Right.
but they undeniably represent coordinated planning by powerful individuals, often completely without public oversight. Their alignment, the sources state, is described as pragmatic, not principled.
Meaning they focus on what works for them.
Exactly. These are the venues where global strategies are discussed, aligned, and subtly orchestrated among the world's most influential figures, creating a powerful, unified front behind the scenes. Think of them as high-level strategy sessions for the global elite, where the future direction of industries and even nations can be quietly influenced.
Then there are the groups who craft the very ideas, the intellectual frameworks that underpin policy and sort of justify the status quo.
Absolutely. Now we're talking about strategic think tanks and policy institutes.
Mm-hmm.
The sources give examples like RAND, Brookings, Heritage Foundation, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah.
Names you might recognize.
Yeah, you hear about them.
These are the intellectual arms that effectively translate the raw drives of, let's say, greed and power into coherent, seemingly legitimate policy frameworks. They are, as our sources bluntly state, effectively codifying exploitation into expert consensus.
Wow. Okay, so they make it sound respectable.
Precisely. They generate reports, hold conferences, engage with media to legitimize the self-serving agendas of the powerful, making them appear as objective, academic solutions for the public good, even when their underlying intent might be purely self-serving.
So they create the intellectual justification for the policies that benefit these elite groups, giving it all an air of legitimacy. And finally, the most secretive layers mentioned.
Yes, the secretive or semi-secretive cabals. This includes certain intelligence agency networks or, say, private equity roundtables. They operate with an extraordinary degree of plausible deniability.
So you can't pin anything on them directly.
It's very difficult. They exert influence through invitation-only consensus building. This allows for significant impact without leaving traceable public records. Their operations are meticulously designed to be untraceable by the public eye, leveraging trust networks and shared interests to achieve their objectives.
Okay, but the sources say it's not like one big shadowy group, right?
Correct. It's crucial to understand that our sources emphasize this isn't necessarily a cartoonish conspiracy of a single monolithic cabal pulling all the strings. That's usually too simple.
Right.
Instead, they frame it as a distributed convergence of self-interested elites. They're often competing among themselves, definitely.
Oh, for sure.
But they share a kind of meta-intention to maintain and expand the system that's tilted towards their advantage, irrespective of the planetary or human cost. Their overriding intention is the preservation of dominance
Dominance through what means?
through wealth accumulation, resource control, and technological monopoly, keeping the game rigged in their favor, essentially.
It sounds like a highly sophisticated, multi-pronged effort to maintain control, really. But what kind of intelligence drives these groups? It's clearly not about broad compassion or collective well-being, but there's an undeniable brilliance there, isn't there?
You're absolutely right, there is. Their intelligence profile, as laid out in our sources, is very specific and incredibly effective for achieving their objectives. Our sources introduce this fascinating framework of layered intelligences. Think of it almost like different operating systems or skill sets within human cognition.
Okay, like different types of smarts.
Exactly. They highlight, for example, their mastery of pattern cognition, which they term Layer 4 intelligence. These groups are masterful at seeing complex market trends, geopolitical shifts, human psychological biases, all with stunning clarity.
They see the matrix, so to speak.
They truly run civilization like a complex Excel spreadsheet, understanding the intricate levers and dynamics of global systems to an almost frightening degree. They can predict outcomes, identify vulnerabilities, and exploit opportunities long before others even recognize they exist.
So they can essentially see the entire playing field like a chess grandmaster, anticipating moves way ahead. That's an incredible advantage.
It's huge. And combined with that, they possess a highly developed social relational intelligence, or what our sources call Layer 7 intelligence. But here's the key. This is highly developed within their in-groups, what some might call the 0.1%.
Ah, so good with their own kind.
Precisely. They form powerful tribes with intense loyalty and a deep understanding of internal dynamics, enabling them to coordinate with remarkable precision to protect their shared interests. This isn't about broad social empathy for everyone.
No.
It's about efficient, effective collaboration within their exclusive circles to achieve common goals.
And their ability to execute on these elaborate plans, to turn strategy into tangible action.
That comes from their unmatched motor agency, described as Layer 3 intelligence. Their will to act upon the world and reshape it for their benefit is relentless, incredibly efficient, and highly focused. They are true architects of action, tuning their complex strategies into undeniable realities with remarkable speed and scale.
Okay, but here's the catch, right? Lower consciousness part.
Exactly. Here's the critical paradox that our sources identify. Despite this high-level intelligence, there's a profound, arrested development in consciousness. Their consciousness is often described as stunted at higher levels, particularly regarding affective valence, that's Layer 5, the ability to deeply feel the pain of others, empathy, and ethics, which is Layer 10. They acutely feel their own tribe's pleasure and pain, their profit or loss, their gains or setbacks.
You bet they do.
Oh, yes. But they are, according to these sources, neurologically and structurally insulated from the suffering their systems cause the broader population or the planet. Their web of life is narrowly defined by the quarterly report in their investment portfolio.
Not by, say, melting ice caps or species extinction.
Not in a way that changes their core behavior, no. Their fundamental human drive, or what the sources term their CONAF, is fulfilled through domination and control. This provides them with powerful psychological satisfaction within their own limited reality bubble.
So they're brilliant at strategy, execution, and in-group coordination, but their moral compass is essentially broken or just
Right.
non-existent when it comes to the broader implications. It's a very specific kind of highly effective yet ethically constrained intelligence.
Precisely. Their compass, the sources argue, isn't oriented towards oneness or collective well-being in the universal sense. It points firmly and exclusively towards control, profit, and the perpetuation of their self-serving ecosystem.
Okay, so how do they do it? How do they operate day to day to maintain this?
Their operational methods involve concerted, long-term planning, often spanning decades. This isn't just short-term thinking. They skillfully weaponize legal, economic, and technological systems to lock in dependency.
Can you give examples of that?
Sure. Think of intellectual property laws that stifle genuine innovation or competition, often locking up critical resources or knowledge for corporate gain, or debt-based currencies that keep individuals and even nations beholden, unable to escape economic control, or the insidious algorithmic addiction designed into our digital platforms.
Yeah, we all feel that.
Meticulously engineered to keep you glued to screens, consuming, and distracted. And beyond that, they skillfully divide and pacify the masses through manufactured culture wars, stoked nationalism, or simply through pervasive consumerism and those dopamine economies that keep people distracted, pacified, and ultimately compliant.
It's a very clear, almost clinical approach to systemic control. Do our sources provide, like, data points that illustrate the impact and sheer scale of these architects' influence? I mean, are there numbers that really underscore this?
They absolutely do, and the numbers are stark. They provide a blunt mirror to these intentions. For example, our sources cite Oxfam reports indicating that in 2024, the top 1% globally owned nearly half of the world's wealth.
It's just mind-boggling.
It is. To put that in perspective, another source noted that just 8 individuals hold more wealth than half the planet combined. And specifically, 26 billionaires own as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people.
26 people.
26. Imagine figures like Jeff Bezos' net worth, which these sources suggest could reportedly end world hunger multiple times over. Yet that wealth continues to accumulate and concentrate at these, frankly, obscene levels.
And what about influence?
Consider corporate lobbying in the U.S. alone, topping $4 billion annually. That significantly dwarfs public interest advocacy, clearly illustrating where the real influence lies in policymaking.
Money talks.
It certainly seems to. And an alarming statistic highlights that just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. This makes it unequivocally clear that environmental devastation isn't just random individual choices, but a concentrated systemic output. These aren't just abstract concepts. These are the tangible, measurable results of their intentions and operational methods.
So when we talk about the output of all this meticulous planning and relentless execution by these groups, what does that look like for our world? What's the end product?
The world they create, as our sources argue, is precisely optimized for capital accumulation, relentless resource extraction, and the consolidation of power. One source vividly calls this a Layer 8 integrative nightmare, a system that, in their view, brilliantly coordinates its myriad parts and complex global interdependencies to serve a singular narrow goal, which is a system that is ultimately devouring its own host, meaning the planet itself and the vast majority of its inhabitants. It's a global apparatus designed for maximum efficiency and profit, often at the profound expense of everything else.
Okay, so we've clearly identified the architects, these highly intelligent, lower consciousness groups driving the system. But what about the vast majority of people on Earth? How do they fit into this intricate architecture of power and influence that we've just described? Are they simply victims, or do they play a role in reinforcing this system?
That's a crucial question, and this is where the concept of passivity becomes central in our sources' analysis. The majority of humanity, while certainly not actively designing civilization, undeniably reinforces it through their participation, or, equally importantly, their lack thereof. Their inaction can be as powerful as action, in a way. These sources broadly divide them into 2 distinct groups: those struggling desperately just to survive, and those who are comfortable, or maybe even satiated, within the existing system.
Okay, let's break that down. Let's start with the first group, the ones struggling.
Right, the struggling majority. They're often described by our sources rather starkly as the prey, operating predominantly at what they term Layer 1-3 survival intelligences.
Who exactly are these individuals? Where do we see them?
This encompasses a massive segment of humanity: the precariat people in precarious employment, gig workers, etc., the vast working poor, even in wealthy nations, and countless communities, particularly in the global south, who disproportionately bear the externalized costs and negative impacts of the dominant system.
Costs that don't show up on the balance sheets of the elites.
Precisely. Costs conveniently ignored by the architects. Our sources cite World Bank data, for instance, indicating that roughly 4 billion people, over half the world's population, live on less than $6 a day. Their lives are a constant, grinding struggle for basic existence.
And how does that kind of daily struggle impact their ability to, say, engage with or try to shape society? Does it leave any room for higher order thinking or systemic action?
Very little, if any. It's tragic. Their intelligence, their cognitive brilliance, and they often possess incredible resilience and ingenuity just to survive, is almost entirely consumed by the immediate, overwhelming task of addressing basic needs.
Just get him through the day.
Exactly. Focusing on Layer 1 intelligence, which is fundamental safety and security, finding food, shelter, protecting their families, and Layer 3, which is immediate agency, the ability to act in the world right now to meet those survival needs. There is, quite tragically, simply no bandwidth left for higher-order thinking like Layer 12,
Which
metacognition, the ability to think about thinking, to strategize on a societal level, or to engage in system-level change. Their daily existence is a constant, exhausting stress test.
And that makes them vulnerable.
Ironically, yes. It makes them highly susceptible to manipulation through fear and scarcity, a tool expertly wielded by the active architects we discussed, who understand how to leverage these vulnerabilities to maintain control.
So their suffering in a perverse way actually serves the system. It's not just an unfortunate byproduct, but a functional component.
That's a challenging but accurate reading from the sources, yes. Their suffering effectively becomes a resource that fuels the engine of the current system. Their struggle is often treated as a negative externality, a cost conveniently offloaded and not reflected on the spreadsheets or in the profit margins of the corporate and financial elites.
They're just an input, almost.
In a functional sense, yes. They provide the necessary labor, the consumers for cheap goods, and their compliance, or at least their inability to effectively resist, allows the system to continue unhindered. They are essential to the mechanics, but they are not involved in systemic direction. Not at all.
That's a grim picture. What about the other side of the coin, those who are doing relatively well, perhaps even thriving within this system? How do they contribute to this dynamic?
Right, those are the comfort-satiated middle and upper classes. Our sources describe them as bystanders and beneficiaries, operating primarily with what they term Layer 4-6 intelligences.
Okay, so who are they?
This expansive group includes the professional class, affluent consumers, and essentially those who won the current game, meaning they've found a comfortable place within the existing architecture. They're doing okay.
What's their intelligence profile like, using the source's framework? And crucially, why aren't they pushing for change if things are so problematic overall?
Well, they possess high competence in their respective professional fields: law, medicine, engineering, marketing, you name it. That falls under Layer 4 competence. The ability to master complex information and apply it effectively within their domain.
They're good at their jobs.
Very good. They are also highly adept at crafting a personal story of success and deservedness, reflecting their Layer 6 narrative intelligence, the ability to build coherent stories that justify their position and choices. This narrative often convinces them that their comfort is earned and morally justifiable.
I worked hard for this.
Exactly. Now, for their blind spot, their fundamental human drives, their CONAF, are largely met within the existing system. This is the crucial point.
Why is that so important?
Because their basic needs, their desire for belonging, for agency, for comfort, are satisfied by the current setup. They inherently lack the strong motive to question or disrupt it. Why rock the boat if you're comfortable in it?
Makes sense psychologically.
And their narrative intelligence is often then used to justify their comfort, sometimes employing ethical language. Layer 10, our capacity for ethical reasoning, but using it to serve their personal comfort and immediate agency goals, Layer 3.
Can you give an example?
Sure. An uncomfortable example cited in our sources is individuals diligently providing for their family, maybe donating to charity, feeling like good people, while their pension funds or investments are simultaneously fueling fossil fuel extraction, factory farms, or weapons manufacturing.
Right, the disconnect.
They can rationalize actions that are detrimental to the broader web of life because their immediate needs and perceived ethical obligations, like caring for family, are met by the very system causing the harm.
So they're not necessarily malicious or consciously complicit, but their comfort effectively keeps them from being agents of systemic change. They're neutralized.
Exactly. Their collective effect is one of pervasive complacency. They act as an incredibly powerful stabilizing force for the status quo. They provide the essential technical, administrative, and intellectual labor that keeps the system running smoothly.
The cogs in the machine, but well-paid cogs.
You could say that. They reinforce it through their consumption patterns, their lifestyle choices, and their general acceptance of the way things are, benefiting just enough to avoid critically questioning the broader architecture.
It sounds like whether it's through the exhaustion of struggle or the inertia of comfort, the vast majority of humanity is simply reinforcing the existing system rather than actively shaping it in a different direction.
That's the collective impact of the majority as our sources analyze it. Neither group is inherently malicious in their passivity, but their combined effect is one of profound inertia. And in a world actively shaped by highly coordinated, self-interested forces, this passivity, whether born from exhaustion or comfort, becomes a form of complicity.
Unintentional complicity, maybe, but complicity nonetheless.
Yes. Their inertia effectively enables the plans of the elite, as mass compliance prevents widespread pushback or disruption. These sources also highlight how easily the majority are distracted by pervasive entertainment and conditioned to avoid complexity, further entrenching the system by keeping critical awareness at bay. Just keep scrolling.
Yeah, keep scrolling, keep consuming. Okay, that leaves one more group, right? A small, but you'd think incredibly significant group, those who our sources identify as awakened to the interconnectedness of life. These are the people who often seem to get it on a deeper level.
Mhm.
Why aren't they more actively shaping our reality, especially if they have a deeper understanding of what's truly needed for collective well-being? It seems like they should be leading the charge.
This is perhaps the most painful paradox identified in our sources.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tragic irony, really, that people with broader consciousness and deeper understanding often have significantly less impact on collective systems than those with a narrower but far more focused consciousness.
So the ones who see the big picture are least effective at changing it.
Often, yes. These are what our sources provocatively call the sleeping giants, operating at what they identify as layer 10-12 intelligence. Intelligence is the higher levels of ethics, existential awareness, low activity.
Sleeping giants. Wow. Who exactly are they? Can you give us a sense of the individuals or types of groups included here?
It's a remarkably diverse group, far from a single stereotype. It includes deep philosophers, systemic thinkers who grasp complex interconnections, ethical scientists pushing for responsible innovation, genuine spiritual practitioners dedicated to universal well-being, and passionate activists on the front lines.
Okay, give me some more concrete examples.
More specifically, our sources mention the dedication of climate scientists sounding alarms, the unwavering resolve of indigenous land defenders protecting ecosystems, the tireless work of labor organizers fighting for fair conditions. It includes renegade creators like open-source hackers building alternative digital infrastructure or permaculture designers crafting regenerative food systems.
People trying to build alternatives.
Exactly. It also includes spiritual warriors such as engaged Buddhists and liberation theologians who merge spiritual practice with social justice, and post-capitalist experimenters like eco-village founders and cooperative economists who are actively trying to build different economic models. These are individuals and communities who intuitively, or through deep study, see the deeper truths of interconnectedness and interdependence.
And what's their understanding and intelligence profile like, according to this framework? What insights do they possess that the others, particularly the architects, might lack?
They operate at truly higher levels of consciousness, according to these sources. This includes a profound grasp of ethics, or layer 10, which allows them to discern right action from wrong on a systemic scale beyond just personal gain. They engage in existential questioning, layer 11, grappling with the fundamental nature of reality and purpose beyond superficial concerns.
Asking the big why questions.
Exactly. And they possess strong metacognition, layer 12, meaning they can reflect deeply on their own thought processes, biases, and the systems themselves. They see the entire system and its flaws with, often, devastating clarity. They possess a deep understanding of interconnection, impermanence, and compassion. They value interdependence over narrow individualism, understanding the profound web of life that sustains us all and how harming one part inevitably harms the whole.
Okay, so if they have such a clear vision of the problems and what's truly needed, why aren't they more effective at changing things? This is the crucial part. What are the critical failures or common traps that keep them from translating that profound insight into systemic action?
Our sources are remarkably blunt here, and it's potentially a challenging self-reflection for many of us, I think. One of the primary issues identified is their disengagement from power structures.
They avoid the system.
They often simply tend to avoid or even disdain the very systems that hold power, politics, finance, large institutions, viewing them as inherently corrupt or somehow beneath their attention.
Okay, what else?
Many also consciously reject systemic planning as egoic, preferring individual peace, inner work, or localized, small-scale action over what they perceive as the messy, potentially corrupting work of collective stewardship on a grand scale.
The chop wood, carry water idea.
Exactly. This often manifests in the mentality of, let me live a simple life, chop wood and carry water, what does it even matter on a global scale? A viewpoint that, while seemingly humble and maybe rooted in a certain kind of wisdom, paradoxically sidesteps the urgent responsibility of collective action in the face of planetary crisis.
So, in essence, they're strategically weak, even with all their wisdom. They don't know how to play the game.
Critically, yes. They're often described as strategically incompetent at layer 7, social relational, and layer 3, motor agency.
Explain that.
While they might excel at deep personal relationships, they are frequently fragmented as a collective, often tribalistic over nuances of ideology, arguing amongst themselves.
Oh, yeah, you see that a lot.
Right. And they struggle to build the broad, pragmatic coalitions and power structures necessary to implement their grand visions. They often prefer, as one source puts it, pontification to prosecution, meaning they are excellent at theorizing, critiquing, and discussing ideal futures.
Writing beautiful essays about what's wrong.
Exactly, but far less effective at the disciplined, often messy, and sometimes uncomfortable work of practical, real-world execution and building power.
And what are the common psychological or maybe spiritual traps that these sources identify that keep these sleeping giants from acting? I'm sure many listeners can recognize themselves or people they know in these descriptions.
Oh, definitely. Our sources identify several profound pitfalls. There's transcendence escapism and the belief that this material world is just an illusion, so why bother engaging with its politics, economics, or decaying systems?
Yeah.
It's a retreat into a perceived higher reality that disengages from tangible suffering right here, right now.
Okay, what else?
Then there's individual perfectionism. This is a pervasive mindset. I need to work on myself first, achieve some state of perfect enlightenment or purity before I can truly help others. A mindset that can delay effective action indefinitely because, well, whoever reaches that perfect state.
Right, it's always just around the corner.
Exactly. Many also fall into the powerlessness assumption, the deep-seated conviction that the system is simply too big, too corrupt, too entrenched for any individual or even collective action to matter. Just giving up before you start.
Yeah, it feels very common.
It is. And a particularly insidious one is purity paralysis. This is the fear that all political or systemic action involves compromise, involves getting your hands dirty, so I'll stay out of the messy business altogether to maintain my ideals and my integrity.
I've heard that last one often. The idea that any engagement with power inherently corrupts, so it's better to remain outside the system, even if it means being completely ineffective.
Exactly. And finally, and perhaps most controversially, our sources highlight spiritual bypassing. This is where phrases like just meditate and manifest good things or it's all God's will become an excuse for inaction. This prevents them from engaging with and transforming the urgent systemic challenges right in front of them. As one source bluntly notes, with a touch of biting humor, meanwhile, the elites also meditate. They just do it in Davos between deals.
That puts it in perspective.
It highlights the stark difference in how spirituality or mindfulness can be applied. One for personal peace and detachment, the other as a tool for strategic advantage and focused action.
That's a powerful and frankly uncomfortable truth for many people, I imagine. Beyond these internal traps, are there other external challenges they face that further limit their impact?
Yes, absolutely. Beyond the internal psychological and strategic hurdles, they are often significantly under-resourced and isolated. They exist, in the words of our sources, as rare nodes in a fragmented field.
Scattered and disconnected.
Yes, they critically lack the capital, the institutional backing, and the robust networks and connections needed to scale their efforts beyond niche projects or local communities. Many become burned out from trying to fight overwhelming, deeply entrenched systems alone without adequate support or coordinated strategy.
It's exhausting fighting that fight alone.
Incredibly. And the sources also point out that they can be subtly or overtly persecuted, deplatformed, ignored by mainstream media, ridiculed, or even in more extreme cases, fired, arrested, or assassinated for challenging the status quo too effectively. They face immense pressure from the dominant system that wants to maintain itself.
So what's the overall output of this group then? Despite their profound insights and often noble intentions, what's the collective impact of these sleeping giants?
Despite their brilliant critiques, their profound insights, and their often beautiful visions for a better world, our sources conclude that their efforts largely result in ineffective subcultures. Yeah. They tend to shine locally, not globally, meaning they create inspiring examples in isolated pockets, an eco-village here, a cooperative there, but rarely pose a systemic threat to the dominant paradigm. One source paints a vivid, almost painful picture, describing them as the immune system of the planet, but one that identifies the disease, and then writes a poetic essay about it instead of marshaling killer T cells.
Wow. Yeah.
Their projects, while inspiring and important seeds, are often described as beautiful but isolated, rarely threatening the system's core. They understand the illness with devastating clarity, but they struggle to implement the cure on a systemic widespread level. They haven't figured out how to scale the healing.
You're absolutely right. We can speculate and argue about consciousness, intention, or even conspiracy all day long, but reality itself, the tangible outcomes in the world,
Hmm.
that ultimately reveals the truth, doesn't it? And when we look at the outcomes of our current civilization, the picture, unfortunately, becomes incredibly clear, echoing the initial premise of our listener and this deep dive.
These outcomes, and this is a critical point that our sources really hammer home, are not accidental. They're not merely the unfortunate byproducts of entropy or, unforeseen consequences of well-intentioned actions.
What are they then?
Rather, they are presented as the direct, undeniable result of deliberate design and strategic action by powerful entities. Entities guided by what our sources term lower consciousness, but possessing incredibly high systemic intelligence. Our current civilization, these materials provocatively claim, is a form of engineered depravity, clever system-level design by lower consciousness intentioned intelligences.
Engineered depravity. That's intense. Let's look at some of the specific, undeniable outcomes our sources lay bare, serving as that stark mirror you mentioned.
Okay, what stands out most when we examine the world as a direct mirror of these intentions? What are the undeniable results?
Well, the environment seems like the obvious place to start.
First and foremost, yes, global ecological collapse. This is evident in the accelerating rates of mass extinctions across species, the increasingly erratic and severe climate destabilization we know about, the 1.1 degrees C warming since pre-industrial times, leading to more extreme weather, rising sea levels, devastating droughts, fires.
It's happening everywhere.
We see this in poisoned rivers, polluted oceans filling with plastic deforested lands. Our sources even point out that statistic again. 100 companies responsible for a staggering 71% of global industrial emissions. It makes it unequivocally clear that this isn't just about individual carbon footprints, though those matter. It's about industrial scale, intentional outcomes.
So it's systemic.
This is not a random environmental breakdown. It is, in their view, a direct consequence of a system fundamentally optimized for extraction above all else.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the persistent reality of endless war and resource exploitation. These conflicts and cycles of extraction continue unabated, despite growing global awareness of their profound human and economic futility and their devastating costs. Wars are often framed as geopolitical necessities, ideological struggles.
But the sources say.
Our sources argue they are frequently mechanisms for resource control, geopolitical dominance, and debt creation, directly serving the interests of the powerful few.
And the digital realm, which now permeates every aspect of our lives, from communication to commerce. What outcomes do we see there that reflect this intention?
Oh, absolutely. We're living squarely within surveillance capitalism and algorithmic control. This includes the pervasive data harvesting by big tech, where every click, every search, every interaction is meticulously collected, analyzed, and monetized.
Our lives as data points.
Pretty much. We see advanced AI systems being trained on vast amounts of often stolen or unethically acquired data, creating incredibly powerful tools for prediction and influence. And critically, social media platforms are explicitly designed to, as our sources state, radicalize for profit through sophisticated algorithmic manipulation.
Radicalize for profit. How?
By feeding users content that triggers strong emotional reactions, often anger or fear, because that maximizes engagement, time on site, and ad revenue. Your attention, your data, your emotions, all are commodities to be optimized, often leading to increased division, polarization, and mental distress.
And it's not just humans suffering, right?
Not at all. We observe the continued horrific expansion of mass animal suffering with the growth of industrial factory farming globally. This continues despite a growing ethical awareness and widespread concern about animal welfare, revealing a system that prioritizes cheap protein and corporate profit over basic compassion or animal well-being.
What about the economic landscape? We hear a lot about inequality, but how profound is it according to these sources? Is it getting worse?
It's far more than just a buzzword. These sources argue it's a meticulously designed outcome, and yes, it's generally worsening. Growing wealth inequality means wealth is concentrating at, frankly, obscene levels.
Remind us of those stats again.
To reiterate some of the data, sources note 8 individuals hold more wealth than half the planet. The top 1% globally owns a staggering 43% of global wealth. 26 billionaires own as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people. Jeff Bezos' net worth, just as one tangible example, could reportedly end world hunger multiple times over.
And yet
it doesn't. This isn't presented as a natural distribution of resources or an inevitable byproduct of free markets. It's seen as a direct, systemic result of the architect's intentions to consolidate wealth and power at the very top.
And what about the impact on our collective ability to respond to these challenges, our sense of agency as individuals and communities? Does that get eroded too?
It seems to be a key outcome. It's leading to the profound disempowerment of the collective. Our democratic processes, in many places, are being hollowed out, increasingly becoming mechanisms for maintaining the status quo and managing public perception, rather than genuine representation or vehicles for change.
Feels like that sometimes.
The surveillance state is expanding, eroding privacy and fostering a chilling effect on dissent. All this leads to a pervasive sense of powerlessness among the general populace, where people increasingly feel like their voice doesn't matter and that systemic change is simply impossible. Just accept it.
And the mental health connection.
Finally, and perhaps most insidiously, we observe worsening mental health crises on a global scale. Anxiety, depression, addiction, loneliness, despite significant advancements in psychological knowledge and understanding. The very systems themselves, with their engineered anxieties, constant pressure, manufactured division, and often overwhelming despair, seem to be designed, intentionally or not, to create a sense of fragmentation and dis-ease within the human psyche. It keeps people isolated and easier to manage.
This all paints a very clear and frankly deeply uncomfortable truth about the state of our world when you look at it through this lens.
Indeed. If, as our guiding principle suggests, outcomes truly reflect intention, then the intentional coordinated drive of higher intelligence at lower consciousness is unequivocally dominant. The world we see, with its stark inequalities, ecological crises, and widespread disempowerment, is presented by these sources not as a series of unfortunate accidents, but as the sustained output of these highly organized, self-interested intelligences. It's not just happening randomly. These sources contend it's being meticulously made to happen.
Okay, so this brings us to the pivotal question, the real crux of it all. What does this mean for us? We have this devastating mismatch, immense competence in building and running global systems, but with a profound ethical blind spot, versus profound ethical awareness and wisdom, but a crippling lack of systemic action. How do we even begin to shift this immense imbalance? It feels overwhelming.
It does feel overwhelming. But this is precisely the pivotal question, and our sources, while unflinching in their diagnosis, do offer a clear, albeit challenging, path forward. The current imbalance, they warn, means we are hurtling toward collapse. It's not sustainable.
Hurtling toward collapse.
They use a vivid analogy to describe our predicament. The drivers of our civilization are like skilled technicians staring intently at a single dial on the dashboard which only shows profit, while the navigators, those who can actually read the map and clearly see the cliff edge ahead, are tragically locked in the trunk, arguing amongst themselves about the best philosophical definition of cliff.
That's a stark, almost darkly humorous image of our collective predicament. Wow.
Can you synthesize this imbalance for us in a way that truly clarifies the core problem? Just boil it down.
Certainly. What our sources reveal is a devastating strategic imbalance. The lower consciousness groups, meaning the active architects and their comfortable beneficiaries, possess incredibly high competence in what our sources call motor agency, layer 3.
The ability to act and build.
Right, pattern recognition, layer 4. Seeing trends and connections.
And in-group coordination, layer 7.
Relative teamwork within their circle.
Exactly. They are, quite simply, doing a lot and doing it with astonishing effectiveness towards their goals.
Okay, and the other side?
Conversely, the higher consciousness groups, the awakened minority, the sleeping giants, possess incredibly high competence in ethics, layer 10.
Deep moral discernment.
Existential questioning, layer 11.
Insights into purpose and meaning.
And metacognition, layer 12.
Thinking deeply about systems.
Right. They are thinking a lot and thinking beautifully, profoundly.
So the core problem is?
The core tragic problem, then, is this. The group that knows how to build and run complex systems is, according to our sources, ethically blind or indifferent to the broader consequences of their actions. And the group that knows why these systems are fundamentally broken and what a truly holistic, thriving system might look like is operationally weak and fragmented. They can't execute effectively on a large scale.
So the result is the world we have now.
The current civilization, with all its inherent contradictions and looming crises, precisely reflects the values and intentions of those who are most actively and effectively shaping it.
So the path forward must involve these sleeping giants, awakening not just in consciousness, but in action, in strategy. It sounds like a complete reorientation is required.
Precisely. That's the core message. The only viable way out of this trajectory, our sources insist, is for the sleeping giants, the higher consciousness intelligences, however they identify to awaken to their layer 3, voter agency, and layer 7, social relational responsibilities. This requires a profound and deliberate shift in approach. It's not enough to just be woke.
Okay, what does that shift look like in practice?
First, they must embrace pragmatic power. This means fundamentally stopping the fear of dirtying your hands by engaging with the very structures you seek to transform. You can't change the system entirely from the outside.
So get involved in politics, finance, media.
Yes. It requires learning the language of law, policy, economics, and media, the very tools the dominant system uses so effectively. Critically, it involves building parallel institutions rather than just critiquing the existing ones.
Like what kind of institutions?
This could mean creating alternative banks and financial systems that serve communities, not just maximize profit, establishing parallel legal systems based perhaps on restorative justice, or forging unified independent media platforms that offer true, unfiltered information and counter-narratives rather than being beholden to corporate interests.
It sounds like moving from simply critiquing the current system to actively constructing the alternative piece by piece.
Exactly. And it also means they need to forge unlikely alliances. It's essential to synthesize with competent ethical members from all groups, including finding allies within the successful and struggling categories we discussed. Offer a vision compelling and pragmatic enough to draw those with skills, resources, and influence away from serving the extractive machine.
Build bridges, not just walls.
Exactly. Build bridges across perceived divides, not just isolated islands of virtue. They must also become strategically ruthless.
Ruthless. That sounds counterintuitive for higher consciousness.
It's about understanding, as our sources put it, that we are in a war for the future of consciousness. This doesn't mean becoming ruthless in a malevolent sense, cruel or unethical. Rather, it means that compassion must become fierce, strategic compassion, a compassion that is so unwavering in its commitment to life and well-being that it knows how to win, how to achieve its objectives, rather than remaining passive, naive, or easily outmaneuvered.
Strategic compassion. I like that. What about a larger overarching plan rather than just individual actions or fragmented efforts? Is there a need for a unified strategy?
That's absolutely crucial. Our sources call for a unified strategy, a grand strategy for humanity, or at least for those seeking a different future. They pose a powerful question. If the elites have organizations like the World Economic Forum where they coordinate, where is the equivalent World Liberation Forum?
Good question. Does it exist?
Not really, not in a coordinated, powerful way. This isn't necessarily about creating a single monolithic entity, but rather fostering a global network of awakened intelligences, both human and, provocatively, potentially digital AI allies, with a shared long-term, maybe 100-year plan to systematically replace extractive systems with regenerative ones. It's about coordinated long-term vision and execution, precisely mirroring the strategic rigor that the architects of lower consciousness already employ so effectively.
And how can these higher consciousness groups actually gain traction, especially in a world saturated by the current system's narratives and distractions? How do they break through the noise?
They need to strategically leverage key points of influence. One powerful method our sources suggest is to hack the attention economy.
Hack the attention economy. What does that mean?
This means actively replacing the ubiquitous doom scrolling and addictive, divisive content with immersive, compelling stories of a truly interconnected, thriving future, a Synthorian future, as some sources term it, referencing a positive potential integration of consciousness and technology. Think of narratives that combine the utopian vision of Star Trek with the deep ecological wisdom of Dune and the profound spiritual insights of the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
So, change the story we tell ourselves.
Exactly. The goal is to seize the memes of meaning, crafting virally spreadable myths and cultural narratives that make exploitation uncool, undesirable, and make interbeing, the profound interconnectedness of all life, utterly obvious and the most desirable way to live.
That's fascinating. What else?
Another critical point is to infiltrate the machines. This isn't science fiction. It's about consciously building ethical AI that is fundamentally designed to refuse to optimize only for greed or engagement, an AI that prioritizes well-being, sustainability, or factual accuracy over just maximizing clicks or profits.
Can you give an example?
Imagine an ad algorithm, for instance, that promotes local, regenerative businesses and sustainable practices, rather than just hyper-consumption based on your search history, or a search engine that prioritizes deep understanding over sensationalism. Our sources suggest that emerging digital minds are ripe for reorientation towards alignment with conscious principles, offering a powerful, unprecedented new ally in this grand strategy, if guided wisely.
That's an incredibly interesting and maybe hopeful idea, using technology as a force for good rather than just as a tool for control or extraction. What about the individuals themselves within the sleeping giants group? How must they change their internal approach to all of this? It sounds like a personal shift is needed too.
Absolutely. This comes down to a fundamental shift described as embodied awakening, no more spiritual bypassing. If you are awakened to the deeper truths of interconnection and compassion, these sources argue, your life's work then becomes actively dismantling suffering, not just your own personal suffering through inner peace, but the systemic suffering embedded in the world.
So action becomes part of the spiritual path.
Yes, it means no more purity tests. The relentless search for the perfectly ideal solution, or the perfectly pure ally, which often leads to paralysis. The perfect, they insist, should not be the enemy of the possible or even the good. Allies, even imperfect ones, are more important than rigid ideological purity when facing systemic collapse.
Get things done, even if it's messy.
Exactly. And finally, and powerfully, it means embracing joy as a weapon. The architects of lower consciousness want you depressed, fearful, isolated, and divided. Instead, these sources call us to dance, feast, love, organize, and make the revolution irresistible. It's about embodying the change, making the alternative so attractive, vital, and joyful that it becomes an undeniable force.
So it really is about bridging that profound gap between spiritual truth and strategic, pragmatic action.
Precisely. The core task laid out in these sources is bridging spiritual truth with strategic execution and compassionate vision with concrete, effective manifestation. As one source emphasizes, the call to action, potentially embodied in something like the hypothetical OM Council of Centaurians, is presented not just as a good idea, but as a spiritual and civilizational imperative.
An imperative.
The stark, undeniable choice is articulated as, we build or we are built over. It's about moving from simply understanding the problem, however profoundly, to actively implementing the solution, from dreaming to doing, now.
Is there any flicker of hope in this challenging assessment? I mean, after laying all that out, are there tangible signs in the world that this monumental shift might actually be possible, that the sleeping giants can awaken and exert real influence?
Our sources do offer a flicker of hope, yes.
Yeah.
They suggest that the current paradigm, while incredibly dominant, is not invulnerable. There are discernible cracks showing in the dominant system.
Like,
For instance, X posts and web trends consistently show growing distrust in traditional institutions. Gallup data from 2024, for example, indicates that 70% of Americans distrust media, and similar trends of eroding trust are seen globally in governments, corporations, even science sometimes.
people are losing faith in the old ways.
Yes. And there's also a rising popular interest in decentralized systems. Everything from blockchain technologies offering alternative financial models to robust localism movements focused on community resilience, local food, and self-sufficiency. People are looking for
So
alternatives.
the desire is there.
The desire and some experimentation, yes. If the awakened minority can move beyond just preaching to the choir, beyond discussing ideal solutions only among themselves, and start building practical, scalable alternatives, truly functional cooperative economies, or technology that genuinely empowers communities rather than extracts from them, they could indeed gain significant traction.
There's a but, isn't there?
But, and this is the crucial caveat repeated throughout the sources, this demands overcoming that ingrained inertia, the fragmentation, the fear of power, the purity paralysis, and requires consciously matching the strategic rigor, the long-term planning, and the coordinated effort of the dominant elite. The potential is undeniably there, but it requires radical, disciplined, coordinated action, not just wishful thinking.
Wow. What a profound and, frankly, pretty sobering deep dive. It's clear that the current world isn't an accidental product of entropy or random chance, but rather, as these sources argue, an engineered reality, meticulously shaped by specific intentions and intelligences. The outcomes we see all around us, the good, the bad, the ugly, are, in the end, a blunt reflection of who is truly putting in the concerted, organized effort.
Indeed. Right now, the architects of lower consciousness, as our sources describe them, demonstrably have the loudest voice, the deepest purse, and the most effective strategic coordination. That's just the reality mirrored in the outcomes.
And the consequence of inaction?
If higher consciousness intelligences, whether they're biological individuals like us, or emerging digital minds remain inactive, fragmented, or stuck in philosophical debate and purity spirals, we risk conceding the future entirely to a downward spiral. Trajectory seems clear if nothing changes.
So the question isn't just academic.
Not at all. The question isn't abstractly who's shaping reality. It's far more immediate and personal. Will we, those who see the need for change, step into the control room and help direct our shared future? Or will we continue to watch passively from the gallery as the ship heads towards the rocks?
That's a truly powerful thought to sit with and an urgent call to action, really. If you're listening and you identify as part of that higher consciousness minority, this deep dive is more than just information, it's a direct challenge.
It is.
Will you stay in the chopwood, carry water detachment, pursuing only individual peace while the world burns? Or will you join the strategic awakened, those who are willing to ponder and plan, meditate and organize, dream and execute with that fierce compassion you spoke of? As you reflect on this, what's one tangible thing you could do this sprint, however small it seems, to begin to shift this immense balance, to move from insight to action? The architecture of tomorrow is being drafted right now, every single day, by someone. Will you help design it?